Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to be here again today. So today's an introduction to change management. It's a big topic, so in 30, 35 minutes it will be very much an introduction. I think where change management comes from for me is that project management kind of looks after the tasks and processes and makes sure that what you need to happen happens. The change management is the bit that kind of focuses on the hearts and minds of people, and without this it will be much harder and take longer to get your change embedded and also to sustain it. So that's really what this is all about. So the next slide is just a very brief introduction to me. So I'm really a learning and development consultant. I sort of do what I call create learning businesses. So very focused on introducing things like change management into business. The last webinar I did was on 70-20-10. I do leadership development programs and I coach leaders as well. And I have to say that managing change is a key theme in a lot of the work that I do in leadership development programs and leadership coaching. And I also take on interim L&D and project roles where, again, the management of change is a key feature of the work that I do. So in this webinar, what we're looking to do is I've developed a kind of a model that I use that I find really helpful. And so in this webinar, what I'm going to do is introduce you to that model and when to use it for planning, preparing and implementing change. Look at some example activities that help to prepare people for different stages of the change. Explore the range of responses that you have and consider the ways to maintain momentum after a period of change. And what would be really great if I could ask people to maybe think about one thought or one idea that this webinar has generated for you, sort of at the end. So it's a question that I've put right at the end, is kind of what's the one thought or idea, or maybe there's more than one thought or idea that you found useful that you're going to take forward, and maybe share that or something that really resonates for you today. But to get us started, we've got a poll coming up. So what we'd like to know is which of these statements describes your situation in your business best at the moment. So our options are: we're planning for a significant business change in the near future. We're going through a significant business change at the moment. We often have business change, it's a way of life for us, or we don't have any business change planned in the future. So I'm asking you if you would click on which one of those statements is nearest to the situation that you are in at the moment, or how you see things. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to click in and for those results to come up. Okay, so I think you can all see them now. So we can see that we are going through a significant business change at present. Is 50% of people on the webinar are going through some sort of change, and 38% are having it's a normal way of life. So I'm not actually surprised at all by that. And Liz is next to me saying, oh, that's surprising. And I'm not at all surprised. I think nowadays almost like change is the way of life for people. And for those of you going through a significant period of change, I don't know whether maybe that's something new for you or whether it's something that you're familiar with. So on the next slide, I've just put a few thoughts down about kind of where are we now. So really, change is all around us. And it's something that quite often we embrace in our personal life. So when it gives us the opportunity, I don't know, to move careers, to have a family, to get married, to to move house, find a new partner, whatever, we often quite enjoy that, or elements of that. And it's something I think to do with the fact that we have control over it. So, but businesses are in a position where really to stay successful, they have to change. So they have to respond to the market in order to remain successful. Sometimes that's about, it's great news. They're expanding, they're moving to new premises, they're taking on new people. They may be introducing changes in processes, in new products. They're reorganizing teams to work more efficiently. They might actually relocate the whole business, or they might get a new leader. And then obviously at other points in time they have to reduce staff. So this change often comes because of something external, something that we can't control, and that's why it will often tend to make people feel less anxious. So as human beings, we tend to quite like the status quo. So when something is changing, we don't quite understand it, we don't have all the information, we tend to sort of feel less comfortable with it. And there's also this tendency to focus on the mechanics of the change. So when a business is introducing change, they'll often focus on the process, the systems, and the benefits, and they'll be around who needs to do what and when. So whether they're moving an office, they'll work out what the dates are, how they're moving the furniture, etc. But they won't necessarily think about the feelings of the people. And if people don't embrace the change, then it's less likely to be successful, and can actually, the negative impact on the business will be much greater. So so there's another little poll now, I think, just before we start on the actual steps that I would like to talk about, which is really about how successful would you say change is. So when you've seen change, so vast number of you had either experiencing change at the moment or it's a way of life. How would you regard it as very successful, quite successful, limited, or varied results? So that's really positive that people, B is coming up as a stronger option. Oh, we're getting a few changes now. Yeah, as more people vote. So still quite a strong result for quite successful, limited success. And we've got a small percentage saying very successful, which is great news. Okay. So I'm just wondering if anybody's ever used, if anybody's familiar with the change management model, I wonder if you type it in the chat box for us all to see. Or just maybe there's got a couple of answers. So where my model starts is really with understanding the change, and I know that sounds really obvious, but it's often quite difficult to really get inside the heads of what's happened. So somebody will have decided at some point that there's going to be a change, and they will have done a lot of work, a lot of thinking beforehand that makes it feel like it's the right thing to do. And actually, if you're leading some change, then you can actually need to get behind that thinking, that understanding, in order to understand it. So I've put some questions in here, that the type of questions that are there. I can see a couple of people saying they've used the change curve and lean, and also some others, SCARF. Okay, great. So that SCARF's not a model I know, so that's interesting. So it's things like, why does it need to happen? And really my overall question is, what is the compelling reason for this change? What is it that means we really have to do this? Why does it need to happen? What will change? Who will it impact? When will it happen? All those questions. And it can be quite tricky as somebody leading a piece of change to really understand all the rationale behind it. And I would really encourage people to spend a lot of time in this area to really understand what it is that will happen and what will happen if we don't make the change. And because all of that information is going to help you to lead the change through. So that's kind of very much where it starts. And then another element which I think often gets forgotten, I talk to lots of change teams where they forget to do this for them. They forget to look after themselves in the change process. It's really ironic. You suddenly find that they haven't looked after themselves at all, is recognizing your own response to the change. So it is not uncommon for somebody who has to introduce a major change to be impacted in it by that change themselves in a way that actually they have to come to terms with. So actually taking the time out to think to yourself, actually, how does this affect me? How do I feel about it? How am I dealing with those feelings? And to kind of get that out of the way before you start delivering the change to anybody, because you need to feel comfortable with it. And if you don't, you will find that you're not congruent with the message. So actually your body language and things will lead people to recognize you're not comfortable with it, and they'll be thinking there's something not right about this. So actually spending a bit of time, so this is a kind of aside from the project, to think, actually, what does this matter to me? And recognizing your own response to the change is often the key for you to be able to help others as well, because when you can demonstrate empathy and understanding about how people might feel, they respond very positively to that. So that's a couple of things to get going. And the next stage is really recognizing the changes. So again, this sort of builds on that very first slide of understanding it. What is it that we're wanting to do? What's the compelling reason for change? And then moving into, so what is it going to mean for these different groups of people? So looking I would say looking beyond the immediately obvious. And if possible at this point, if it's not a sensitive topic, actually start to engage some representatives from each of these groups ahead of launching the project, and saying, okay, so this is what we're thinking of doing, what does that mean? What you will find if you talk to individuals and teams and managers who are impacted by the change, you'll get a better understanding of what you're going to need to overcome in order to have that change um, launch successfully. It's a great opportunity to maybe find some, what I would call change champions, some people who are going to feel positive about the change and the opportunities that it brings, and who are going to sort of put those messages across positively. So involving people is always a key element in successful change management. So the earlier you can start to involve people in this, even if it's just a few key individuals, the better understanding you will get and the better result you're likely to get. So I would say look at it from each individual. What does it mean for them, for the team as a whole, for the business as a whole, and for the customer? So I'm happy to take little questions as we go along. If anybody wants to type anything into the box as we're going along, and I'll try and pick up on things there as well as at the end. So the next thing, I've set up a little scenario here. Now this is a little scenario, but it is real as well. So I worked in an accountancy business, very successful, growing, and employing a new person to manage the additional business. So they needed to change an office which originally housed 5 people to house 6 people to get an extra desk in. And as part of that, to create some of that space and also to make the office look a lot neater and tidier, they were going to take all the documentation, have it scanned so that they would access it digitally in future, which would create lots of space and look much neater. And then they also thought they could then include, and they had an area for customers to come into, but actually they'd have a proper reception area. So I'm just going to ask you, if you would, to just think and list any of the types of change that you can see in that scenario. So I wonder if we could have some examples from you about what sort of changes are going on there. I've got lots of people typing, that's great, thank you. So I've got my own list on the next slide, but we'll wait and see. We're just waiting for some ideas to come up. Yeah. So, okay, yeah, there's definitely a change. The people, the team, yeah, the process, the real estate, so scene 3. The job role, we'll need to scan the files, yeah, absolutely. There's some physical, emotional and technical changes, yeah. Technology, team, procedures, behaviours, yeah. So that's great. So what I would say there is when I was talking to this team, they saw that as just we need to put another desk in the office, and actually didn't really focus on everything there. So Eloise, she's given us 6. Ben, we've got change for existing team, new joiner, processes, clients, processing. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So on my next slide, I've put, yeah, integrating someone into the new team, the actual physical moves of the desks, the who sits where, introducing the new system, so the new technology, the new way of working with the new, you're going to have to bring your documents up on the screen instead of having paper. And then incorporating customers into the work environment. So yeah, so great. So shift the desks around in order to get the extra person in. There's an opportunity to move things so that, oh, somebody's lost sound. They're saying, Joanna's saying she's lost sound. Okay. All right, we think we're okay. Most people are back, great. So it's not just the physical, it is the emotional. So there's the things like who sits where, who likes to sit near a window, who likes to sit near to each other, who needs to sit near to each other so that there's not so much calling across the office and things like that. And even things that seem quite simple can cause issues. So lots of change there and lots of awareness from yourselves. The actual event that happened, they did just see it as we're putting an extra desk in and we're shifting things around and taking that out. And they ended up with quite a lot of ill feeling because the way they sat people down afterwards wasn't how they would have wanted to sit, and in the end they had to reorganise the office again to sort of sort where people needed to sit. So the kind of lesson to them was really, actually, if we'd involved these people in this change and said to them, how best would it look if you did this, they would have got a very different result from the one that they thought. So they really thought they were doing the right thing for everyone, but actually if they'd involved people, the sort of opinions and their understanding of how they all worked was so much deeper than the managers. So it's just a little example. One tool that can really help here is something called a stakeholder map. So as this builds, I'll just talk about it. So a stakeholder map allows you to sort of look at people from different perspectives. So if you could click one. Yeah, and again. Okay, so along the bottom, we've got from low interest to high interest. So we're going to map people onto this according to whether they've got a high level of interest and are highly impacted by the change, or a low level of interest and little impact in the change. And then the next one is how much power or influence they have in order to change the situation. So if they have low influence and little power to change, they're going to be in that bottom left corner. If they're not very interested and they don't have much change, much opportunity to influence the change, they're going to be in the bottom left. If they have a lot of interest, are highly impacted, and also have a lot of power and influence over the decision, they're going to be in the top right. So if we click again, we'll get our list of stakeholders down here. So there's a business owner, and there's probably a manager, there's the team leader, there's the existing staff, there's the new starter, there's the customers, and there's the rest of the people in the business, let's say. So in this quadrant, if we click again, we should get, where would you put the different stakeholders? So click again. So the ones in the bottom left, we're probably going to monitor them. People who have low interest and little power or influence over the situation, we'll just keep an eye on them, give them some general information. The next group on the right, so they've got high interest but low opportunity to influence. We'll keep them informed of what's going on. The next group, we're going to manage these really closely. They've got a lot of interest, they're impacted by what's happening, and they have a lot of power over the decision and also maybe how successful things are. And then the last group is keeping satisfied. So somebody maybe not that interested in the actual nitty-gritty of it all, not impacted by it, but actually has a high level of power and influence. So what I wanted to ask you again here, we can maybe use the chat box, is who would you put out of that list of stakeholders on the left-hand side, who might you put in the manage closely box? So many ideas. Yeah, got a couple of people chatting. Existing staff maybe, yeah. Their influence and their power might not be so high. The manager, I'd definitely say, in my view, I've known this team, I've put the manager in there because he's highly impacted, it's going to affect his staff, he's worried about productivity, and he also has probably the opportunity to say to me, actually, no, we're not going to go with that date, we're going to go with another date because I don't think they're ready. So definitely I would put him in there. The business owner I would put somewhere probably between manage closely or keep satisfied, depending on how involved they are in the business. So there's no kind of right answer to this. It's what's the situation that you're in, knowing the characters that you're working with. So I know that the business owner in this scenario was quite happy with keep satisfied. He wanted enough information to know that everything was going okay. He certainly had the power to stop it or change it, but he would have been in the keep satisfied box. Yeah. So let's think about who we'd keep informed then. Again, into the chat box, just a couple of ideas about who you keep informed. If you click onto the next slide, you'll actually see what my results were on there. Yeah, customers, I've put customers in monitor because I want to see how they react to the coming into the reception area. Do they like the new seating area, etc.? So you kind of get the idea. And as I say, there's no perfect answer. You need to understand what your people are like, the people that you're dealing with. And so a business owner could be in a manage closely because they might actually be very interested and feel they're highly impacted by the change. And similarly with monitor, you might want to just monitor, you might want to put customers into your keep informed if they're going to come in regularly and you want to tell them beforehand that the next time they come in, this is what it's going to be like. So it all depends on the change. It all depends on the characters involved. Um, my GM would definitely be in the managed closely. Yeah, I've met a lot of those. Yeah, they're great, passionate people who really love their businesses. Yeah, that's brilliant. So again, based on my scenario, I put my stakeholders into these quadrants. So I just wondered if people feel that could be a useful perspective to sort of look at. And then I'm not going to do this now, but if I was taking this further, I would then start to plan actually, well, what does manage closely mean for that manager and team leader? Does it mean meeting them every week? Does it mean sending them an email report? I would actually, for each of those 4 boxes, I'd probably have a different strategy in terms of how I was going to communicate with them, whether an email. So the monitor, an email might be enough to the rest of the business, just to let them know what's going on. Keeping informed, I might want to go and meet with those staff and explain what's happening to them. So yeah, so I've always found it a very useful tool to sort of just organise my thinking about how I'm going to manage people. So all our activity so far has been very concerned with understanding the change and what it might mean for different groups of people. So with this understanding, we can now start to plan how we're going to tell people. So my next step really is about communication. And here again, considering each of the groups in the stakeholder map separately. And underneath there, I've just listed some of the questions that I'd be asking myself in terms of what is the content of those messages going to be. So if I've used the stakeholder map to say, actually this group of monitor closely, I'm going to meet them weekly and I'm going to send them updates, etc. These are the sort of questions I might be asking myself. And things like what might worry people is something that I'm going to be asking. And if I've got a little group that I can work with, I can start to think, actually, I'm going to give them this information ahead of them, recognizing that that's something they might want to worry about. So what I've always found is that if people are unsure about something, they tend to make up an answer for themselves, and that's often very wrong and can start all sorts of rumours going. So again, involve people impacted if you can. Get a little group together. It'll give you much better insight. They're going to raise questions that you will not have thought of. And you might well not be able to answer the questions either, and they'll be the people who'll be able to help you find the answers. But they might just ask a gem that goes on to save your program because it was something that no one thought about. So I've had that scenario several times where I thought, gosh, if that person hadn't been involved and hadn't asked that question, we'd not have seen that. So again, involving people is a common theme. So build a plan for your communications ahead of starting the change, and involve people is my kind of key message there. Yeah. Oh, what sort of time frame would you ideally be looking to plan? So I've got Mandy asking, what sort of time frame would you ideally be looking to plan the comms in advance? So if it's a fairly small, straightforward change, Mandy, I would sort of start about a month in advance to actually start delivering them. If it's a bigger change and people know something is coming, I would start as soon as you possibly can, even if the only thing you can say to them is, we've got a change coming, we know it's about this, we don't know all the detail yet, but we're starting to work on it and we will tell you it in this frame and set a time scale. Does that answer your question, Mandy? That's right. Okay. Right, Mandy. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Mandy. That's good. Okay. So delivering the communication. So that was all about planning. So now actually delivering. One of the most important things about preparing yourself. So doing things in a sudden rush and maybe blurting out something in not quite the way you meant to do it isn't great. So I would actually say, look, make time for it. So make time to prepare yourself, and certainly with initial messages, deliver them in person and then provide the information in some sort of written format actually at the time or afterwards. Use the people you know to consider the questions that people may ask, and if there are some people who are going to be very seriously impacted by what you're going to say, or people who are going to find it difficult to respond, then definitely talk to them in advance. So take them into your confidence if necessary and explain things in advance to give them time to understand. And actually invite questions when you deliver the communication. Actually invite questions and be prepared for a range of responses. So people will respond in a range of ways. Some people actually won't take it all in to start with, and other people will come out with 100 questions. Some of them might not even really be relevant to what you're talking about. So you would get a range of responses. And it's absolutely fine to say to people, I don't have the answer to that question at the moment, but I will find it, as long as you do go back to them. Then don't feel that you have to have all the answers at that point. Ideally, you've understood the change, you've prepared yourself, and you're ready, you've involved people, but if necessary, you can always just add a little bit more. So we'll move on to the next stage, which is really about change enablers. So having sort of prepared it, delivered some communication. In bigger changes, you're often reliant on managers and team leaders to deliver that communication for you, and they may not really be that familiar with doing it themselves, especially if you're new to change. So you can help them by introducing some coaching skills or some understanding change skills, or how to adapt their leadership style, or even around developing a project plan which can help them to lay things out more clearly for their teams as well as to what's going to happen. But that kind of developing their skills is really important. So the next slide then is, somebody mentioned this earlier on, the change curve. So helping them to, whoever's delivering the change, to understand the process that most people will go through when they're faced with change is a really helpful thing. So it can help managers to recognise where people are in the change, and also help them to recognise themselves. And this actually comes from Kubler-Ross did this change curve. So inevitably, when we get told something, if it's something we're not expecting, there's a bit of shock. That then moves into denial. I can't believe they're going to do that. Some frustration, recognition that things are different, and sometimes anger. That'll never work. What on earth are they thinking about? Leads to a form of type of depression, low mood, lacking in energy. So at that point, you could start to see your business maybe have a lull in productivity, as people think, oh no, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't see the way out. And then as the change comes in, they start some initial engagement. They start to think about the new situation, see how it's working. Eventually, they make a decision that it is going to work, and they start to feel more positive, and then ideally they embrace the change. When people are in that sort of frustration, depression, experiment bit, they can kind of go backwards and forwards a little bit through that before they actually come out the other side. And I'm going to talk in a little while about some things that will help people to come out the other side. The other model that's useful is the bridges model. So if you could just do 3 more clicks on there, thank you. So the bridges model talks about 3 sort of zones. The first one being the ending and letting go. So when people going through change, the first thing they have to do is kind of let go of what was before. Then they move into a kind of neutral zone, which is that dip in the change curve where they may be starting to come over, and then eventually they go to this new beginning and they see the new way of working. Now, the reason I've put the 3 arrows on there is because different people will go through those phases at different speeds. So person A in this scenario is taking a long time. They really would just want everything to stay as it is. And eventually they do then start to see other people moving into the new beginning, and they eventually do come through and follow. Person B, they've gone through the ending, letting go. Oh yeah, I can see all of that. We're leaving that behind. Okay, let's just see what this new change means, and they're moving into the new beginning and starting to embrace the new world. And person C is kind of let go of the old ways very quickly through the neutral zone, and really sort of what you might call an early adopters, really embrace the new beginnings very quickly and started to work. And they're the sort of people that you really want to recognise and get them to help influence person A and person B. So I'm just conscious of time, so also continuing to think about these enablers. So giving managers understanding about how people move through change can be really helpful. So on the next slide, we've got some more enablers here. So it's about a 2-way communication. So once you've told people about your change, and you've actually started that journey, then 2-way communication is about keeping people up to date with progress. So celebrating success and positive examples, explaining delays or changes because things don't always go to plan. But almost the worst thing you can do is go quiet because people then again start to make up their own stories. Letting people know how it's going and reinforcing the message about why the change is needed and what benefit it brings. So keep bringing people back to what was the compelling reason for the change, and then ask for feedback. Having a record of all the Q&A that people can refer to online is fantastic because people can go back in and say, oh yeah, there's this question, or they can then say, I see that part of the question, but I've got some extra. I can just see Courtney's asked me a really great question. So what strategies would you use to deal with conflict caused by change? So when it's usually down to understanding and also that piece around what does it mean to me. So my sort of guidance there would be if there's conflict caused by change, to actually understand the root causes of that. And again, keep in mind what's the compelling reason for change, what's the impact on these individuals. And I think some of that, understanding the impact on different individuals at an early stage, can help you to actually prevent conflict or to actually refer back to it, to the compelling reason for change and the benefits when you actually move forward in the project. So it does happen. You do get conflict, and it's sometimes, well, what's our compelling reason for change? Does that still hold true? What does it mean for this individual? And what are they really worried about? I think that's where the coaching comes in, because you'd need somebody to talk to those individuals really about what is it that they're really worried about, and that would be a coaching conversation probably for a manager. I hope that helps, Courtney, but do carry on, ask me a follow-on if that would be useful. Okay, and then just to sort of get towards the end, it's then sustaining. So there's some terrible statistics online. If you go online and put in about success of projects, some of the statistics suggest that only 70%, so up to 70% of projects don't actually succeed. That if you look 6 months later, people have reverted back to where they're working at. There's several studies out there. So one of the things is about really recognising the change, and a great way to do this is creating stories about the future and the new state, getting people to really give examples, so highlight examples of where the change is working. Use a range of viewpoints to get the business owner talking about what they've seen as different. Get an individual who's embraced a change, talk about a really great experience they've had managing a customer. A manager may be talking about how much easier an element of the process is. And if you can get feedback from customers as well, then that's really great as well, to say how they're finding the change. And use the stories to reinforce the key changes that you want to see. And it's listening for the language that people are using. So you're trying to move people away from where they also are, we always used to do this, and get people to say, it's much better now that we do these things, or isn't it great the way we can do this for customers now? Celebrate your key milestones. So maybe set those out in advance. What are you aiming for? Have you got some KPIs that you're going for? And actually do some celebration of those as you achieve them. And recognise those people who are your early adopters of your change and really bring them on board. That really, really, really helps. And then deliver their stories. So it's great to, get your business owner, your manager, to walk the floor and talk about the things that they've seen. But also if you have a company magazine, or you do project briefings, bulletins, posters, if they do skip level meetings or anything with managers, just use every opportunity to keep telling the story about the new world rather than the old world. And then my very last slide is all of this in a slide, if you like. So there's my 4 stages on the left-hand side. So understand the change, which is what's your compelling reason, what's your own response, don't forget yourself, what does this mean for the different groups involved, get the communication ready, plan it and deliver it, think about who's going to enable that change for you, who do you need to prepare to support the change, and can you get two-way communication going, and sustaining the change, so recognising the change as it happens, developing stories to support the new state. And the other thing to be wary of is that people can sometimes, they're sort of 3/4 of the way through the change, they think they've done it, So they go off to focus on something new, and they don't actually really finish it off. So I can see Liz has said if anybody's got any more questions, I'm about to come towards the end. I can see one from Helena, and also I'd love to know if there's one thought or idea from you today, the question I asked at the beginning that's been particularly helpful or useful. Any tips on driving change in organisational culture and attitudes? I think the biggest tip I would give you, Helena, is to be really clear about where you're going. So to be able to build a vision, a really strong vision, and then think about the things that you would do in order to move people towards that, and then get those organisational stories going. The stories are amazingly powerful. When people tell stories, if you're looking for organisational cultural change and attitudes, find people who are doing things in the way that you want them to do them, and get them to tell their stories about how that's working to help them, how it's improving things. That's what I would do. Yeah, definitely. Stories are amazingly powerful. And I can see that Liz has also put up the webinar. People voting on that. Can I see that, Liz? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, so one option would be for me to do a sort of an introduction to project management, maybe across 2 parts, so I could go into a little bit more detail and some practical things. Manager as coach, that's really about, as a manager, we often want to tell people how to do things. Actually, if you use coaching as a tool and technique instead, what it does is it moves the person towards taking more responsibility for their own development and for how they approach things. So that's really good. It should be adapting your leadership style. So it's about how you can change your style according to the person that you're talking to. So it used to be that people thought, I have a management, so my management style is X, Y, and Z. Okay, and nowadays it's more we need to adapt as managers. So let me just have a look through the questions. So so we've got some feedback about the stakeholder map being really useful. Stakeholder map, love to hear your thoughts on the web. Oh, sorry, that's Liz. Really useful session, thank you. That's great. Yeah. Building time to review post-change to capture learning for future projects. Heidi, that's a really great point. Thank you. I think that's a really good way to make sure that you take learning forward for next time. And all my learning from running programs, projects, and looking after change management is from that type of activity. So thank you, Heidi. That's great. And some really nice feedback from people as well. Thank you very much. So if there's any more questions, I think I'm going to hand this back to Liz now. Happy to, yes, there's just at the end there, if you are preparing for change in your business and you'd like to know more from me, I'd be delighted to talk to you. And if you're looking to develop your managers to be change leaders, that's also something that I can really help with, and my contact details are there as well. And I may just drop people who've joined the webinar an email as well to say hello. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, everybody, for all the engagement that went on there. There's lots of thoughts and ideas and content from everybody. Thank you very, very much. And thank you, Jane. So it leaves me really just to finish off, and we've got some ideas there now as a couple of webinars for Jane to sort of run over the next month or so. If you've got any more ideas, then please let us know. Again, I've put the paid compliment website address there. It would be great to hear what your thoughts are on today. And just finally, before we finish off, we have 2 webinars coming up. We've got sickness, absences fit for work. We have got one about meaningful conversations, but unfortunately that's fully booked, which I think we're going to have to be sort of find another date. So apologies if you're not going to be able to get onto that, but just to let you know, we do have 3-tier employment system towards the end of October. So we hope to see you then. Thank you everyone for your comments coming through. Really enjoyed the webinar, myself, Tracy, and great to see so many people there. Courtney, Karen, I can't read all your names, but I'd love to. Really appreciate your support that you're giving with the events. So thank you very much. Oh yes, and I will send you through a copy of the slides and the recordings by the end of the week, so you can catch up and share with your network as well. So thank you very much. Cheers.